All right, well, welcome everybody to a special Omaha Bar Association virtual chat that I'm doing with three of the leaders of the League of Women Voters chapter here in Nebraska. We are interviewing them for the Law Day festivities that usually happen in person. We have our Law Day lunch every year. Unfortunately, it's been canceled due to the health crisis going on, but I'm very happy to have the League of Women Voters as our OBA 2020 OBA Public Service Award recipient. And that award is given out to one person or organization every year. And we're giving it out this year to the League of Women Voters in the Nebraska chapter because for the last 100 years, they've been civically engaged to try to get people to vote, to understand what the issues are that the government is, the politicians in the government are dealing with, and truly non-partisan understanding of you have the right to vote, go exercise your right to vote. And our Law Day theme actually has a tie-in here. Law Day theme that's chosen every year by the American Bar Association for 2020 is Your Vote, Your Voice, Our Democracy. The 19th Amendment at 100, because 2020 is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. So with that introduction, I will go around the square here and introduce everybody. We have Dr. Dianne Bystrom. She is one of the co-presidents of the League of Women Voters Nebraska chapter. She is a professor emeritus at Iowa State, correct? And you were, I guess it's past tense, but also future present tense here. You were going to be the speaker at the Law Day luncheon, and we're going to release a little speech that you've put together for a few different organizations about the same topic, 19th Amendment. So welcome, and thank you for being here today. And I like your posters behind you.
Yes, and these posters, MaryLee is in charge of our centennial celebration on our board, and we have 7 banners. These are 2 of them. It's the first banner, the long road to the 19th Amendment in Nebraska, but these would have been displayed at your luncheon in addition to my talk. And so I wanted to have 2 of them behind me. These typically would be at our Omaha office, but the last time they were displayed were in Lincoln where I was speaking. And then I've been home ever since. And so I have the banners with me. And
the office is at AIM on 19th and Farnham, is that correct?
Yes. Office.
We love doing events there in that space as well. So I think I've walked by that office a few times. Linda Duckworth, you are also co-president. So there are two presidents at the same time of the league, and you're here in Omaha at your dining room table, right?
That's right. At my
And also on the line we have MaryLee Moulton. You've been a longtime leader in the league here, and it looks like an amazing ship. That's not a ship in a bottle, but that is quite a project behind you there.
Yes, that was a ship that was built by one of my husband's patients at the VA, almost 30 years ago when he was a resident.
Any idea of how many hours went into that?
Oh, lots and lots of hours.
Wow. Well, you all have been a part of this organization for a long time, and while I've been an admirer from the side, you all can speak better to the history of the organization. 100 years this year. Can you give us a bit of a background on where the league started and where it's at today? And I'll open it up to whomever wants to answer the question.
I'll start out.
Feel free to follow up.
The League of Women Voters was actually founded on February 14th, 1920 at the National American Women's Suffrage Association annual meeting in Chicago. And I think that what's significant about it is it was actually founded about 6 months before the 19th Amendment was ratified. And so there was great hope among the suffrage leaders. There had been a number that had ratified by then, but we were looking for the last date. Carrie Chapman Catt, who I directed the Carrie Chapman Catt Center for Women in Politics at Iowa State University. She's an Iowa State grad. She was president of the League of Women Voters twice, but her last time was 1915 to 1920. And so she led what was considered the winning plan toward ratification of the 19th Amendment, which occurred August 18th, 1920 in the state of Tennessee. but then it was signed into law by U.S. Secretary of State Bainbridge on August 26, 1920. So that is typically Women's Equality Day, and actually the official date that we will celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment. But the League is actually older than that because we were founded on February 14th, 1920, in an effort of CAT and other suffrage leaders to educate these new voters coming into the being enfranchised. So.
And yeah, they're new voters, right? These
Yes.
were first-time voters, and that's when it's important to educate them, because they don't have that history of voting, and so there's a lot to that. Even registration today, education continues. Registration today, people still think they have the right to vote, but they've never registered, and that can trip them up at the polls.
In addition to being nonpartisan, the League has also been always open to men. So I think that's what also, makes it. What?
Not,
It hasn't always been. Okay, Linda knows more than that. I thought it always has been open to men. Never mind. Here's an interesting factoid, though, that I think is interesting. So, the amendment was ratified in August, right before the presidential election, which was in November. And so what happened is about 30% of women voted in that election. And so Carrie Chapman Catt and other suffrage leaders were, mocked on the pages of the New York Times, and see, we told you women didn't want to vote. But it took, and I think, although it took from 1920, and then in 1964, more women voted than men, and it's been that way ever since. And they not only vote in sheer numbers more than men, but they vote in a greater proportion. And that's why you see so much emphasis on women voters, that just really has happened since 1980. Because, for example, when Barack Obama was elected president, there were 10 million more women that voted in that election than men, and most of them voted for Obama.
And going to that history, so in 1920, when the vote was allowed for, not on the basis of sex, everyone can vote. How was the turnout? Was there still suppression going on in certain locales? Did that continue? That discrimination continue, even though it was constitutionally not allowed?
That's exactly right. There were in many states, in quite a number of states, especially southern states, there was a great deal of voter suppression, and it affected African-American women and African-American men, and actually in many cases, poor anyone, because they had poll taxes. Those were completely legal. And so when we say that women got the right to vote, there were a lot of women who didn't actually have the opportunity. I suppose they, on paper, had the right to vote, but they actually didn't. So that is kind of a distinction. And it's interesting that once the what is the amendment in 1965?
It's the
Voting Rights Amendment. That definitely expanded opportunities for many, many people, including a lot of women who had been disenfranchised for a long time.
Yeah, actually in 1964, the Supreme Court outlawed poll taxes, and now there's an amendment banning poll taxes.
Yes, right.
The Voting Rights Act of 1965, which, by the way, as you all know, has been peeled back by a recent decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. Yeah. So it doesn't have the teeth it used to have.
So I'll just to go back to who was able to join when we first became an organization. Men, I think it was 1978 that we encouraged men to join, we allowed men to join. And so what I wanted to also say is that back in those days, in 1920, when only 30% of the women voted, and they said, see, they don't really want to vote anyway. And another thing that we were being told, that women were being told, is that you ladies don't know enough about the issues, and so you really shouldn't be voting. And so they said, we'll learn about the issues. And so I actually ran and got my program from our handbook, because we started studying issues right away. And there were child welfare issues, because man, that was something to really fight for back in those days. And mothers were the most likely to care about that. And so that was on that was nationally, we were working on that. But then we have a local league, that's the Greater Omaha League. We have our state league, and then we have the national league, and we can all study issues, and we have. And so I'm just going to very quickly mention some of these that we have done what we have studied specifically in the local Douglas County or Omaha here. City charter amendment. It's all about government. So we've studied that possibility, as far as also city financing and urban planning and human resources, social policy, juvenile justice. That was only about maybe probably 30 years ago now that there was a big push to study juvenile justice in Omaha. Anyway, so there are, we continue to study, and then once we have studied and had consensus and really worked on this, then we take a position. So we have many positions on a lot of different issues as a result of 100 years of working on this.
And one of the positions right now that we're really pushing is redistricting and fair redistricting. And there's a program on both the national, the state, and the local level for fair maps. And so the league here in Nebraska is backing an amendment to the Constitution to have redistricting be basically taken away from the legislature, and a nonpartisan committee would do that.
That's fascinating. And actually, I'm a sucker for tie-ins, synergy wherever synergy can happen. Yeah. So here's the tie-in. Professor Fenner, Mike Fenner of Creighton Law School, now emeritus professor, he actually did his Lunch with Fenner last year on gerrymandering history and in recent times. And it was a compelling argument for how there really can't be a solution, even a politically tenable solution to all parties using the current system. And so he echoed that in his remarks, which I think are recorded somewhere in the OBA archives for people to look at. But that is one of the distinguishing things. In addition to educating the public, there have been positions taken, maybe would be called progressive positions taken by the organization, that we should do better in certain areas, including fixing some things that are just politically in favor of one party or the other, right? Gerrymandering, politically in favor of one party over the other by its name, by its definition, mostly Republican right now. But
actually, that's not true. There are states like Maryland and Nevada where the gerrymandering has helped the Democrats. So it's not strictly one party or the other. It's a question of really whoever holds power tries to keep power. So it really is a nonpartisan issue to have fair maps and to do away with this gerrymandering and have fair redistricting.
I can speak to that, coming from Iowa, that we actually have a nonpartisan redistricting system in Iowa, and we have had both Democratic, but mostly Republican in the 20-some years I lived there. And as MaryLee just said, whoever was in power in Iowa, they would have, it was independent, so it never happened there. But and what I always like to, so we have a nonpartisan commission there, but I think had it been in the hands of the legislature, I agree with MaryLee, it would have mattered on who was in the governorship and if they had control of both houses. So I think what you find now is that you have Republican governors and Republican legislatures in a lot of states, and so, but there are, as she said, Nevada and Maryland are also try to keep power that way.
Can you speak just a little bit to money in politics? This is a personal, issue that I find fascinating, horrifying. But the league does have a history with campaign finance reform.
Yes.
Would anyone like to talk on that?
Right. I was active with the league. It's probably been 15 years ago almost, when we co-sponsored an amicus brief with, I think it might have been Common Cause Nebraska, and it had to do with, it was after, that's right, it was after the Supreme Court had had ruled that corporations are people, and I've forgotten the name of that. I don't know. I can't believe I've forgotten the name of that.
Citizens United. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And so yes, but even before that, we had worked with organizations, especially I think it was Common Cause, to get Nebraska's system going. Do you remember when we had this pretty impressive system where people were not allowed to spend too much money? As I recall, it was definitely people running for the legislature, but I think it was other positions too. Mm-hmm. And then that sort of blew up, partly because of Citizens United, but it wasn't entirely because of that. And you might be able to, I'm sure you can fill me in better on that, Dave. But
well, my side was raising the money. It wasn't the, you know, we had Perkins Coie doing our legal side and telling us what we could and couldn't raise. But it was, where's that max? Where's that limit? There's no limit here in the state party.
Yeah.
Go write a check. So I come from the side of, I've seen the darkness. Take us to the light. Get us away from the fundraising that I did.
We actually.
What else we can do? What candidates can do? They can hold on to that money. They don't have to give it all away at the end of their campaign, and so they continue to raise. And then they do. Many of them run for other offices, but they also work to influence a lot of other elections with that money that they continue to raise. Go ahead, Dianne.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm very impressed. I've been in the league not as long as Linda, so I didn't know it was never open to men. I joined when I was in Oklahoma, I think in 1995. I'm new to the Nebraska League, but we have an expert on our board, Kate High, who lives in Lincoln, and she's become really an expert on money and politics, gives quite a few presentations. She actually organized a panel through the University of Nebraska's lifelong learning program, OLLI, and so we had a panel on money and politics back in the fall. I moderated it. It was very well attended. We had the second session planned for this April, but all the OLLI classes at UNL have been canceled. But it was interesting because the panelists included two Republican men in the fall. Another one was going to join us in the spring. There were three fairly prominent Republican senators who there was a dark money campaign financed against them because they were considered as too moderate because they had voted against the governor on 3 issues. And they were just interesting people. There was Al Davis from Hyannis, and then there's a guy from Wahoo. He's currently the mayor. I'm forgetting his name. And then there was another one. But it was very well attended, and it was a great program. And so, I have to give a lot of credit to Kate High because she's been our #1 person on that issue.
Absolutely. And, going back in the history, I saw this 1950, the first televised debate was hosted, sponsored by League of Women Voters. Mm-hmm. Growing up in North Dakota, our debates for political office were sponsored by the League. Mm-hmm. That continues here in Nebraska. I see it on NET or the local broadcast channels. And what's that process like? Are you involved in the asking of questions, or does the moderator take that on themselves, or is it just that you want to make sure that they are debating and actually talking about the issues instead of just campaign ads?
The league does the congressional debates, and we do it with the press club, and we're involved in both formulating the questions, and then we're involved the day of the debate itself. Now, we were supposed to have a debate among the Democratic candidates, but unfortunately, due to the COVID situation, the press club canceled that debate. But we look forward to having a debate among the Democrat and Republican, and if there's a Libertarian candidate, I don't know if that will be the case, but in sometime in the late summer, hopefully.
The first league event I went to here after I moved here in August 2018 was the Press Club and the League of Women Voters sponsored event with Don Bacon and Cara Eastman, who was a candidate at the time. And I was so impressed with the way it was run. It was really run well. And another thing about it is I really felt that both Eastman and even Don Bacon, they both enjoyed the format. They were very happy with it. And it was a great debate.
Mm-hmm. It was wonderfully civil.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. It was very similar.
Yeah.
And I guess, putting on my political hat for a second, usually if you're an incumbent and you, you know, have a big war chest for ad buys and things like that, debating can only serve as a way to weaken your potential run for re-election, right? And so there's this kind of rolling of when you're in power, staying in power, and one of the things is, you know, oh, I don't need a debate. Or you know, we'll do one very short debate, and it won't get into the issues. But when you're supporting and pushing debates, that can really help bring issues to the forefront that wouldn't be there otherwise. Make candidates maybe be a bit more open to you know, maybe more. We're talking about getting to the middle, right? Being more centrist, I guess, and working across the aisle instead of being partisan. So I'm glad that those debates exist. I love watching them. I love going to them. I appreciate all that the league does for that here and across the country for sure. Yeah, there's been a lot of issues with that. Go ahead, Linda.
Can I add then that I would encourage all of the Omaha Bar Association members and every citizen to make a very specific ask to anybody who's running for office, but especially the incumbents. Yes, do participate in debates and do answer questions in the League of Women Voters Guide. You know, don't just assume that you've got it covered or that it could hurt you rather than help you, because this is what we expect of you.
And I think this is a good place, and I want you to talk, but we are, you know, what we're pushing right now, typically at this time of year, we'd be doing all these voter registrations. Joanna Lindbergh in our Omaha League, I mean, she'd be registering voters at high schools now. I think in some years they've registered 2,000 voters in the Omaha area, not only at high schools, but at naturalization events. So she'd be working on that right now. Well, we're not because of the COVID situation. So we've been, as a league, really been pushing vote by mail. Linda has had a recent meeting with Wayne Benna from the Secretary of State's office. There was an opinion piece authored by the co-presidents of the Omaha League that appeared in yesterday's Omaha World Herald. We're also, you know, pushing out more letters to the editor. But the big thing is, and I really think it's going to be more important this year, and as Linda said, I really think that candidates, if you're a wise candidate, I mean, I've run campaign schools. If you're a smart candidate, you're going to participate in Vote 411 this year. That is the online resource. It's already launched in Douglas, and I think Sarpy County, or just Douglas?
Just Douglas County.
And then so that was launched Wednesday. And then the rest of the counties will be launched on April 15th.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that if you're a candidate and you're not responding to those questions, because I think all of you, we've all gotten emails and phone calls, like, when is Vote 411 going to be up? You know, we had someone that moved here from Wisconsin and now teaches at UNO. Where's the Vote 411 guide? And so they want this information. And I will tell you, as a new voter in Nebraska last year, when I opened up Vote 411 and the people that didn't even take the time to respond, as a new voter in Nebraska, not going to vote for them. Not going to vote for them if they're not going to respond. And they're not gotcha questions. They're important questions.
And in Douglas County, we normally have a printed voter's guide that goes out to all of the libraries. It goes out to the Douglas County Election Commission. But because of the COVID situation, we're not going to have anything in print for the primary election. It's all going to be online. And right now, you can go to either the LV League of Women Voters, LWVGO.org, so the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha site, and there's a PDF of the voter's guide for Douglas County on that. And then for if you want to just go to the vote411.org, you can also get a ballot that has your particular races on it. You can create that within vote411.org, and you can do it now for Douglas County, and on the 15th you'll be able to do it for anywhere in Nebraska.
Could I add something? This kind of reminds me of my husband and my son. When our son was younger and he lived with us, the three of us would sit around with the voter's guide and our ballots, our mail ballots, our mail-in ballots, and we would talk about the issues, or we talk about the candidates, and therefore end up talking about the issues too. And it was just a great exchange. And so this reminded me that there have been comments from some politicians saying that one of the reasons vote by mail is a bad idea is because people have like get-togethers where they all vote together. And I'm like, that's not that bad a thing. You know, I think it promotes discussion. It doesn't mean that you're all filling out each other's ballots or somebody's filling it out for you. It just means if you trust everybody else who's in the room with you and you want to talk about these issues, these candidates, you can do that. And then undoubtedly there might be somebody in the room who knows a candidate who you know nothing about. And especially when it gets down to the races like the NRD and the maybe county board or the OPPD or one of those. So I think that using the voter's guide with friends is not a bad idea.
And also,
I agree with you. It's kind of like it's a mini Iowa caucus, right? We all get together.
Yeah, it is, right.
Yeah.
keep in mind, though, that the ballots for vote by mail are extremely secure. After you finish your ballot, you have to put it in a sleeve, you have to seal it, and then you have to sign it. And they check all those signatures because we've been called before. My husband, who's a doctor, used his doctor's signature once, and they called and wanted to know if it was really him. And he had to talk to them because they look at every signature and they match it to your driver's license. So for people who are really concerned about election security, in some ways it's really more secure to have vote by mail.
Yeah.
MaryLee, is the doctor's signature look like a kind of a bird's nest? Is it just?
Yeah.
Well, and that's, you know, something that we're dealing with right now is what does the voting look like? And I guess we should pause and say, if you aren't registered, you have, I believe, April 27th to register for the primary. That's the deadline. May 1st is the last day to request vote by mail, and May 12th is the primary election, right?
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
still in-person voting on the day of right now. There's not early voting, and this is Douglas County. There's not early voting in person, but there's the vote by mail option. So
yes.
as we're educating people, that's important to know. November 3rd, general election. But if we're looking towards the future and not knowing if it's safe to be in public, to be around other people, and we're going to the general election, vote by mail has been discussed as what we should do for the general election. I don't think we're going to stop people from voting in person on May 12th. But we don't know, right?
But, well, not all, we know that they will not be able to have all the polling stations open. I mean, that is just a given. So that is kind of problematic, but yeah.
Yeah, because if you look at Wisconsin, I think it was Milwaukee that went from over 100 polling places to 5 or something like that. So we're not going to have enough poll workers, which means they're going to have to stand in line for hours. And to me, it was just inhumane what the state of Wisconsin did to their voters. I mean, from what we've seen right now, and I think Linda knows more about this, is that I know that absentee ballots are way up this year over what they were in the last primary election. So people are doing this. And, and I think, talking again, and this really ties into the 19th Amendment, it's a federal constitutional amendment like the 14th and 15th that granted that states could not prohibit voting on account of sex. That's a favorite film that Lucy Bader Ginsburg were in her life, but not on account of sex. They couldn't prohibit it, just like they couldn't prohibit on account of male and race by the 14th and 15th. Mm-hmm. But states came in, I can't remember which amendment it was, but it was the 14th or 15th that made voting a state regulated right instead of a constitution. So what states have done, and they did it with they did it first with the 14th and 15th Amendment, then with the 19th Amendment. They precluded certain voters, and it wasn't on they couldn't say you can't vote because you're black, you can't vote because you're a woman, you can't vote because you need to pay a poll tax. But stepping ahead to the future, we have that same thing going on today. There's not a lot, but there's like 10 states that almost totally prohibit vote by mail unless you have what's called an excuse. Now, we don't have that in Nebraska. It's no excuse, vote by mail. But in other states, you have to say, I'm going to be out of town, or I'm ill, or I'm in the hospital. And so, but today, voting rights in this country are a state-controlled right. And that's what really gets scary. And it gets scary when you see what just happened in Wisconsin. And it gets scary looking at the November election.
Yeah, and well, I'm a fan on top of everything else. So first of all, we should say, if you're worried about maybe not being able to vote in person because the polls are going to be long lines and potential issues, go ask for a mail-in ballot, right? Everyone that's registered to vote can do that. Go do it. There's an online form. You should have received a mailer in the mail. I didn't. My wife did. I'm
Yeah, we're hearing that. We're hearing that.
Yeah. So, but there's the online version if you didn't get it in the mail. But go register online, and you'll get that ballot in the mail. It'll be returned. Now, again, I'm going to put on my political hack hat here and say, in the past, when there are states that have mostly people voting in person, they've done the in-person count, and they've said if it's, oh, we have this many more, but they don't count the mail-ins until later. If they come in, all at the end, if you mail it in a couple days before, they don't necessarily count them at the same time. So if you get the mail-in ballot, try to return it early, right? That's also something, because then it's counted before it's in the initial count. So as we're talking about what the final count is, I'd hate to be sending it on the day of and it's not counted until 2 weeks later, and it just becomes an issue.
What we do, I think that there are 4. I guess this is Douglas County, but but it could be statewide. They count the ballots, I think, 4 times a day. And the first one must be the morning, the people everybody who voted in person up until about noon or something. And then I think the second announcement is all the mail-in ballots that they have at that point. So yes, they get counted on the day of, not early, but on the day of. And then there's, the rest of them. So usually by 9 or 10 p.m., pretty much all the races in Nebraska, I think, are decided.
Do keep in mind, though, that if you're going to send your vote by mail ballot in, you want to get it in the mail probably 5 days before the election. And if you're going to try to vote after that, you really need to put it in a drop box to make sure that it's going to be there on time. And there are drop boxes all around Douglas County. And there is if you go onto our website, there's also a list of where the drop boxes are on the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha website, and also on the Douglas County Election Commission website.
Yeah, and it'll save you a stamp. And also, really, it's important to know that if your ballot doesn't get back to them by, I think, 8 p.m. On the day of the election, it does not count. So that's really, drop boxes are a great idea.
It's not postmarked before the election. It has to arrive by 8 p.m. on the day of the election.
There's some states that do a postmark deadline, but
not Nebraska. Right. We're not one of them.
Yeah, but and even here I am in Plattsmouth and Cass County, and our election commissioner actually set our postcards. Well, we got ours 2 weeks ago, and then we just got our ballots this week. But I do also know that they have a drop box right outside the courthouse or something in Plattsmouth, and so there's drop boxes all over the place, and so. Yeah. And we also learned that, I think most people, it only requires 1 stamp, but let's say you just don't have a stamp or you're in a situation you can't go buy them. We also learned that, and it was in the opinion piece yesterday, is that even if you don't have a stamp, we did learn that the Postal Service will deliver it. Now, we're not promoting that. We're not promoting.
Put a stamp on it.
do they send the bill to the Secretary of State's website?
If you have a stamp, use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should also plug membership in the league, which I think it's a very reasonable $40. Is that correct to be a member?
Well, that's the first year. I think it's actually $45 the first year, but after that, it's bumped up to $60, I think, or $62.
You hook us in, and yeah.
Right.
But for the work that's done, and for you have a lot of programming, really quality programming, and so if you're interested in these issues of everyone getting opportunity to vote, and for some of the issues that we talked about, certainly go on the website and join and get involved. I just love how it's open to everybody, and while the name has women in it, I could be a member, and be involved.
I expect you to join, Dave.
Later today, and especially since it's online, I can do it online. I like that. So.
And then you'll be invited. And actually, at the Lunch and Learn, we have Lunch and Learn, we have Dine and Discuss. Well, for Lunch and Learn next week, I think it's next Thursday, It'll be virtual, of course. Is it Friday? That's right, it's Friday.
17th,
It'll be a Zoom meeting, but we are going to highlight various issues going on in the state. But one thing that is really important to me that I'm going to make sure we devote a few minutes to are the various efforts to have initiatives, various ballot initiatives, and many of them are not anywhere near getting enough signatures, but it's still important to know about them and what they're, and so there are several of them, some that we think are excellent, such as the redistricting, and some that we're not so sure of. And so that's why it seems like a really good idea to know a lot more about those, because I think people are, we're just so caught up in the pandemic that's going on that we are forgetting that. We're also forgetting the census. But then Dianne and discuss, we've decided we need to just take a break from some of the difficulties. So we've got Jeff Katurba, who's going to be on with us for that one. So anyway, we continue to meet. And then also, I just want to say membership in the league, it's so important to me because these are the best people in the world right here that I get to hang out with. And so that's a really good reason, I think, to join the league, because such quality friends,
I think another thing that coming in here from, I was in the Iowa League, and my local league was Ames and Story County, which is where Iowa State is. And actually that's our largest league. You'd think Des Moines would be in Iowa, but actually it's Ames and Story County. So when I transferred here and became part of the League of Voters of Greater Omaha, and I went to my first membership event, which was at a wine place somewhere. I can't remember the name of it, but I thought, oh, it won't really be what it was. And one thing I was really impressed with is the diversity in the Omaha chapter. There were young women, there were women of color, there were men. And so that's a push both on the National League level on diversity and inclusion, but certainly at the state league too. And so we've been able to recruit some younger women both to the co-presidency in Omaha. Those are both two young women. We have young women on the board there, but we've also been able to recruit a couple of younger women and women of color onto the state board. And so I think that really changes the dynamics, and I know all of us want to work even more in that direction.
I will say, as a co-president on the state league, we have got just a really dynamic board made up of these women that Dianne is mentioning, and that's amazing and wonderful, and it also creates more work for the two of us, doesn't it, Dianne?
We have a plan
We're all
now.
volunteers. We're doing all this is with our volunteer time, so yeah, but it's great. I wouldn't have it any other way.
I have a question. This is kind of out of left field, but the history of Nebraska is unique, with George Norris bringing the unicameral from bicameral to unicameral. Did the league work with him? I don't even know when that was, when that took place, when he was pushing for that. I was wondering if that was a joint initiative, because I was thinking that it would make sense, but I didn't know.
I remember looking that up, trying to look it up a few years ago. I think that we were madly studying, actually. Let me see if trying to keep up with all that. So
it would have been in the 30s, the 1930s.
Right. Dave, we'll have to get back to you on that. I'm
sorry. I'm reading American, or what is it? American Liberal, or what? No, I forget the name of his biography, and it's just like this. There's so many connection points to what the league does and how his policy ideas were. So,
well, I know in doing the suffrage display, there is one banner that has William Jennings Bryan on it, and he was an early supporter of women's suffrage. I think one of the interesting things that I did not know until starting to do some research on suffrage in Nebraska is that we had several opportunities to be the first state that gave women the right to vote. First opportunity being in 1856. Amelia Bloomer from Council Bluffs came over here and spoke to the legislature. First, she spoke in Omaha in 1855, and then in 1856. And when you think about it, the suffrage movement began in 1858 in Seneca Falls, New York. And so we had this opportunity. And so then other states jumped in, territories and states jumped in before us. And it really wasn't until in 1917, we had limited suffrage. So we had, I think, was it three different times that they voted to change the Constitution, and it failed. Nebraska 3 times. And so there got to be a thing that was like Nebraska next. And this banner, oops, the other one, this banner right here is by Richardson. And the interesting story, so my husband's name is Keith Neville Bystrom, and his grandfather, Keith Neville, was governor in the state in 1917, and he was pro-suffrage. And so he signed the Limited Suffrage Act in Nebraska in 1917, but then people collected all these signatures and they were found to be fraudulent. And this is, whoops, I always do this. Richardson was the one that, and there's a picture of her. They basically presented all these fraudulent votes. Anyway, the Supreme Court of Nebraska sided with the suffrage leaders. And so before the 19th Amendment, which was ratified in 1920, Nebraska women could vote in municipal elections and also for presidential electors. And so we were a state and had that right for about 2 years before the state then ratified the 19th Amendment. And I believe we were the 10th state overall on August 4th, 1920. And you mentioned Judge Lori Smith Camp. We actually kicked off our celebration. MaryLee and Linda had a lot to do with the planning of that on August 26th. 2019, because that was the 100th anniversary of Nebraska voting for ratification. And Judge Lori Smith Camp was our featured speaker.
And she's our president-elect of the Omaha Bar Association. I had the joy of interviewing her yesterday. And she is in charge of organizing the 8th Circuit Conference for the Federal Circuit that includes Nebraska. And that is still scheduled for August of this year, and we're hoping that it still goes forward. I'm very excited about that. I will let it slip that there is a plan that potentially includes a female justice of the U.S. Supreme Court that goes by her initials in many circles. I can't give away more than that because apparently the court doesn't like us talking about this, but there's a possibility that she would be.
What you're talking about.
but the league is involved in celebrating this and hopefully having a big tie-in at that 8th Circuit Conference in Omaha in August with the 100th anniversary as well. And so we're excited about that. We're hopeful that things get back to somewhat normal so that we can all celebrate together in Omaha in August, which is the actual centennial, right? August
26th.
26th.
Mm-hmm.
And MaryLee's in charge of being our contact on that. MaryLee, you want to fill them in a little bit? If it is going to be happening, what we're going to have there.
Well, we've been working with Judge Smith Camp for over a year now, and we are going to have leagues from all over the 8th Circuit bringing displays. So we'll have displays. We're from Iowa. They actually have a suffragette a wagon, which is absolutely hysterically cute. It's just adorable. That's going to be coming. We have a display on from Iowa also on African American women in suffrage. But different states within the 8th Circuit are all bringing different displays. You can see some of the banners from Nebraska behind Dianne that we've done. But we're really looking forward to being there and working with Judge Smith Camp to make it a success. And fingers crossed that that we're able to do it. So let's hope things are back to normal by then.
Absolutely. I don't have any more questions down on the paper, but is there anything additionally that you want to talk about? You all just do such a great job for exactly what our public service award is. So it's just it was a slam dunk, I have to tell you, to get you the award this year. The conversation was just effusive among the public service committee of the OBA, and so we're very excited. But anything else that you'd like members to know and members of the public that are viewing this?
Dave, I would like to, since you brought up George Norris, it reminded me that it's his quote that it's okay to have this unicameral because there really is a second house, and the second house is the citizens. So that we work hard to try to be those citizens, that second house, and to encourage others to be part of that second house.
Absolutely.
And then also just to make sure that everyone has filled out their census, because that's going to be really important for redistricting come 2021, and get registered to vote by mail, vote at home, and stay safe so that that your vote's still going to count even in these perilous times. So,
and go to vote411.org.
Yes, to get educated. That's our mission. Get everybody educated.
And every vote counts, right? I mean,
Yes.
this is,
Yes.
hear that all the time. My vote doesn't count. No, it does count. And it counts for, there are more than just one, there's more than one race on the ballot even. So
Whole bunch.
it all counts.
I'll end with another historical reference, is that the 19th Amendment was ratified by the Tennessee legislature by one vote. Harry Byrne, 32 years old, was going to vote against suffrage. His mom sent him a telegram and said, I don't see what I don't know what your position is, but it ended with, Harry, be a good boy. Help Mrs. Cat put the rat in ratification. And he voted for it. So the 19th Amendment passed by one vote, the Tennessee legislature on August 18th.
So your vote does count.
So one vote does count.
One vote absolutely does count. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me this morning on this teleconference, and we look forward to virtually handing you the award here, which will be actual physical award, but getting that to you here and over the next few weeks. Thank you so much for all that you do, and we'll make sure to include, when we post this, information on how to get to 411 vote411.org. The League's site for Omaha and for the state, and the national site and everything like that, so that we can educate as you all have done so well for so long. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for the award. It means a lot to us.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Again, take care.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.